The question lands in the middle of a packed press conference at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Flashbulbs pop, tape recorders click on. It's 1984, just months after Thriller has rewritten the music industry's math. On the stage sits Michael Jackson, posture straight, expression soft but guarded, a single crystal glove folded neatly in his lap. A reporter stands. "Do you feel threatened by Prince?" There it is. The turning point object isn't a weapon, it's a microphone on a stand, angled toward Michael's mouth, red recording light blinking. The question hangs in the chandelier-lit air like a dare. Across town, Prince's Purple Rain is climbing charts, the film electrifying theaters. Radio hosts are already framing it as a duel, pop versus funk, moonwalk versus guitar solo. The stakes in that moment aren't personal pride, they're narrative control. If Michael fires back, the rivalry hardens. If he dismisses Prince, he risks looking insecure. If he praises him too openly, tabloids spin it as concession. Michael doesn't argue. He pauses. The pause stretches just long enough to feel intentional. He tilts his head slightly, eyes lowering toward the glove in his lap. "I think Prince is very talented," he says softly. "There's room for everyone." It's a neutral answer, too neutral for headlines. And that's the calculation. Days earlier, the industry's rules had already been written in bold ink. MTV rotations were stacked with Billie Jean. Stadium tours were being mapped. The red leather jacket from Beat It had become shorthand for global dominance. But Purple Rain changed the texture of the conversation. Suddenly, critics weren't just comparing sales, they were comparing authenticity, musicianship, mystique. At CBS Records headquarters in New York, executives clipped newspaper columns with phrases like "the real musician" and "the true innovator," comparisons that could chip away at carefully built mythology. In rehearsal spaces in Los Angeles, Michael was running choreography for the Victory Tour with militant precision. 5, 6, 7, 8. Every spin timed, every freeze frame rehearsed. According to accounts from dancers present, he asked to rerun a sequence after reading a review that praised Prince's live guitar work. Not out of anger, out of awareness. Back at the Beverly Hills Hotel press conference, the reporter tries again. "Would you ever collaborate?" He smiles, barely. "I'm always open to great ideas," he replies. Another neutral answer, another non-headline. But backstage, after the press conference, according to some insiders, he asks for the exact wording of the question to be transcribed. He wants to know precisely how it was framed, not emotionally, strategically. Because comparison isn't accidental, it's engineered. In Minneapolis, Prince is also fielding questions about Michael in interviews tied to Purple Rain. He offers clipped responses, sometimes playful, sometimes evasive. The rivalry narrative feeds itself. But Michael's response pattern remains consistent. He doesn't swing, he studies. Weeks later, in a private meeting at CBS, executives float an idea, lean into the rivalry. Subtle lyrical jabs, visual contrasts, promotional angles that frame the Victory Tour as a counterpunch. Michael listens, then reportedly shakes his head. "No negativity," he says. The room goes quiet. Because negativity sells, but calculation lasts. At rehearsal that night, under harsh white lights, Michael changes the pacing of the show's opening sequence. The intro becomes longer, the build slower, anticipation stretched. If the press wants a fight, he will give them suspense instead. The calculation isn't defensive, it's architectural, and it's only just beginning. Because the next time the comparison surfaces publicly, it won't be in a hotel ballroom,
it will be on live television.
The comparison didn't explode on stage. It detonated in the quiet. A private industry dinner in Los Angeles, late 1980s. The kind of room where executives from CBS Records and Warner Brothers Records sit 2 tables apart and pretend they aren't watching each other. Crystal glasses, low amber lighting, a string quartet playing softened pop standards no one is listening to. And at a round table near the center, Michael Jackson in a black jacket with a single silver armband, quiet, observant. Across the room, not seated but circulating, is Prince, sharp suit, unreadable smile, saying little but seeing everything. The moment that matters doesn't come from either of them. It comes from a producer leaning back in his chair, swirling a drink, voice just loud enough to travel. Prince is the real musician, he says. Michael's the showman. It isn't shouted. It doesn't need to be. The room tightens anyway. Michael hears it. The silver fork pauses halfway to his plate. He doesn't turn. He doesn't argue. He doesn't even blink long enough to register offense. The comparison hangs in the air like a test. Musician versus entertainer, composer versus performer, authentic versus commercial. He sets the fork down. That small, deliberate gesture is the turning point object, not a glove, not a contract, a fork placed back onto porcelain without a sound. He doesn't defend himself, he calculates. 3 days earlier, the tension had already been simmering. A radio host in New York had played back-to-back tracks, Billie Jean and 1999, asking callers to choose which artist represented the future of black pop. The phones lit up. The framing was deliberate. There could only be one king. In boardrooms at CBS, executives discussed market share, MTV rotation, tour grosses. Michael's Thriller had rewritten industry math. Prince's Purple Rain had proven that a singular creative vision could command film, soundtrack, and stage in one sweep. 2 different models of power. The media loved the binary, one polished, one raw, one global, one elusive. They rarely mentioned that both wrote, produced, arranged, and obsessed over control. The week before that dinner, Michael had been in a rehearsal studio in Encino, mirrors lining the wall, tape marks on the floor. He was working through a dance break, repeating a spin until the landing was weightless. Again, he told the choreographer, voice soft but firm. Perfection wasn't ego, it was armor. Because comparisons weren't just artistic, they were racialized, commercialized, weaponized. 2 black men at the top of a system that rarely allowed one. The industry didn't just ask who was better, it asked who was safer, who was more marketable overseas, who could cross over without threatening the balance of power. Back at the dinner, the producer's comment spreads table to table. A few heads turn toward Michael, waiting for pride, waiting for retaliation, waiting for a quote that can be carried into Monday's column. Instead, Michael lifts his water glass, takes a measured sip, and places it exactly where it was. Across the room, Prince watches. According to accounts from attendees, he smirked slightly, not cruelly, but knowingly. He understood comparison as fuel. He'd built part of his mystique by refusing to compete on anyone else's terms. The host of the dinner attempts to smooth it over. They're both geniuses, he laughs too loudly. Different lanes. But the room doesn't relax. Because what's at stake isn't just reputation, it's narrative control. If Michael accepts showman, he risks being minimized as spectacle. If he attacks Prince, he risks looking insecure. If he stays silent, he risks letting the story harden around him. Silence can be surrender or strategy.
Later that night, as the dinner thins out, Michael stands to leave. No speech, no confrontation, just a polite nod to the host. Outside, the Los Angeles air is cooler. A black car waits at the curb. Inside that car, according to a longtime collaborator, he doesn't vent, he doesn't curse the producer's name. He asks a different question. What are they saying exactly? Not emotionally, analytically.
The meeting at CBS Records doesn't begin with outrage. It begins with numbers. Conference room, mid-morning, Los Angeles office. Glass table, legal pads, a cassette recorder placed near the center, as if documentation alone can keep egos contained. Executives in tailored suits flip through sales projections from Thriller and tour revenue breakdowns. On the whiteboard, international markets circled in red: Japan, Europe, South America. At the head of the table sits Michael Jackson, soft-spoken, almost slight against the leather chair. No raised voice, no visible irritation about the showman comment that floated through that industry dinner 3 nights earlier. Instead, he asks a question. How many tracks can we cut live? An executive frowns. Live? Michael nods. Musicians, in the room. No shortcuts. The air shifts. Because this isn't about defending himself against Prince. It's about redefining the battlefield. Prince's mythology, built in studios where he reportedly played multiple instruments himself, had become shorthand for authenticity. The press loved that narrative, the lone genius, the multi-instrumentalist, the uncompromising architect of his own sound. Michael understood narrative. And he understood something else. Perception is production. That afternoon, he calls for a studio lock-in. Not a press release, not an interview, a session. At Westlake Studios, the same rooms where Thriller once echoed through the walls, musicians gather. Guitar amps hum. A drum kit is mic'd carefully. The control room glows with LED meters and quiet anticipation. Michael walks in wearing a simple button-down, black pants, loafers. No glove, no fedora, just a legal pad tucked under his arm. Let's build it from scratch, he says. The producer raises an eyebrow. All of it? All of it. The first night runs long. Bass lines reworked, harmonies layered, stripped back, rebuilt. Michael isn't dancing on stage under spotlights. He's pacing between the drum booth and the piano, snapping his fingers to mark rhythm, beatboxing bass patterns into a handheld recorder. At one point, a guitarist suggests a riff that feels overly ornate. Michael stops him gently. Too busy, he says. It needs space. That's the calculation. Not to out-Prince Prince, not to mimic the mythology of a one-man band, but to demonstrate authorship in a way the cameras never see. The next evening, a journalist from a trade magazine requests a studio visit. Ordinarily, access like that would be limited, carefully staged. But this time, Michael agrees. Controlled exposure. When the journalist arrives, he doesn't see choreography rehearsals. He sees sheet music scattered across a piano. He sees Michael debating chord progressions with a keyboardist. He sees the singer tap out drum patterns on a table to explain a syncopation shift. Who wrote this bridge? The journalist asks casually. Michael looks up from the piano keys. I did. Not defensive, not sharp, just factual. The article that runs a week later doesn't mention the dinner comment. It doesn't need to. It describes Michael as meticulous, hands-on, deeply involved in composition. The framing changes by degrees. Meanwhile, comparisons intensify elsewhere. At a rehearsal space in Minneapolis, according to accounts from musicians who worked with him, Prince hears about the new sessions in Los Angeles. Someone mentions that Michael is trying to prove something. Prince reportedly laughs. He's always proving something. Not bitter, not threatened, observational. Because rivalry in the 1980s wasn't just personal, it was structural.
Two black artists operating at levels the industry hadn't planned for. One framed as the virtuosic auteur, the other as the immaculate performer. The escalation continues at an awards show weeks later. Backstage, corridors thick with camera crews and publicists. A reporter corners Michael with a microphone. People say Prince is the real musician. Your response? There is again, the comparison, now public. Michael pauses, looks directly into the camera lens. For a half second, the world waits for defensiveness. Instead, he smiles softly. Prince is very talented, he says. We all make music in our own way. It's a diplomatic answer, too diplomatic for tabloids hungry for conflict. The clip airs. Commentators call it gracious, others call it evasive. But back in the studio, something sharper is taking shape. A track built around live strings instead of synths. A vocal take left intentionally raw in parts, breaths audible, edges intact. Decisions that subtly undercut the manufactured showman label. One night, near 2 a.m., the control room falls silent after playback. The producer leans back. They won't expect this. Michael's eyes stay on the mixing board. Good. Because the title moment isn't a shouted rebuttal, it isn't a diss track, it isn't a public feud, it's a release. A song that forces critics to confront the architecture beneath the spectacle. A performance that showcases not just movement, but musicianship. A strategic shift designed weeks earlier when a fork touched porcelain in a Los Angeles dining room. And when the album listening party is scheduled, industry insiders, journalists, radio programmers invited, the guest list includes the same producer who made the real musician remark. The room is set, speakers calibrated, lights dimmed. The comparison will surface again. This time, the response won't be silence.
The lights dim at the private listening party in Los Angeles, and the room goes still. Same industry faces, same calibrated smiles. The producer who once said, "Prince is the real musician," stands near the back wall, drink in hand. Executives from CBS Records cluster near the mixing console. Journalists lean forward in their seats, notebooks ready. At the center of the room, beside the soundboard, stands Michael Jackson. No sequins, no spotlight, just a quiet nod to the engineer. Play it. The first track begins not with a drum machine, but with a live snare crack, dry, unprocessed. A bass line slides in, human fingers on strings, not quantized perfection. Then piano, real keys, slight imperfections in timing that signal intention rather than accident. Heads tilt. This isn't spectacle yet, it's structure. Halfway through the song, a guitar riff cuts sharp across the speakers. Not ornamental, not flashy, but precise. The kind of riffs critics often praised in Prince's catalog as proof of musicianship. The producer at the back shifts his weight. Michael doesn't look at him. He keeps his eyes on the mixing levels, hands folded loosely in front of him. The second track begins. This one opens with layered harmonies, intricate, interlocking vocal lines. No heavy reverb to mask them. Every breath audible, every pitch exposed. A journalist whispers, "He left that raw?" Another replies, "On purpose, because that's the calculation." Weeks earlier, when the comparison was thrown across a dinner table like a casual insult, Michael understood the real stakes. It wasn't about ego, it was about authorship, about who controlled the narrative of black genius in a system eager to simplify it. Now the room is hearing something it didn't expect. On the third track, the drums drop out entirely for 8 bars, just voice and piano. No choreography to distract, no glove to glitter under stage lights, just composition. The same producer who once drew the line, musician versus showman, lowers his glass. When the final note fades, there's no immediate applause, just a beat of silence. Then, clapping. Not explosive, not frenzied, measured, respectful.
An executive leans toward Michael. "This is different." Michael nods slightly. "It's honest." That's the detonation. Not a public argument, not a feud headline. A shift in perception executed through arrangement, instrumentation, and restraint. After the listening session, conversations ripple through the room. "I didn't realize he was that involved in the arrangements. Those chord changes. Who's playing guitar on that second track?" "He shaped it," someone answers. "All of it." The next morning, trade magazines adjust their language. Words like architect, composer, hands-on appear more frequently in print. The binary begins to crack. It doesn't erase Prince's reputation, nor should it. Prince remains singular, fiercely independent, deeply respected for playing multiple instruments and controlling his output. The comparison doesn't vanish, but it evolves. Because Michael never attacked it, he outmaneuvered it. In the weeks that followed, rehearsals for a televised performance begin. This time, when cameras roll, something subtle changes. During the breakdown, instead of disappearing into pure choreography, Michael moves to a keyboard positioned stage left. He plays a short progression live before stepping back into the dance sequence. It's brief, 8 bars, but it's intentional. The audience cheers, some for the music, some for the surprise. Critics note it the next day. "He's reminding them," one columnist writes. Reminding them that spectacle can be authored, that precision can coexist with groove, that silence at a dinner table can be more strategic than outrage. Back in Minneapolis, according to musicians who later reflected on that era, Prince hears the new material. He doesn't publicly respond, he rarely does, but insiders say he respected ambition. 2 different approaches, 2 different philosophies, both expanding what was possible for Black artists operating at a global scale. The industry, however, learned something sharper. Michael's refusal to argue wasn't weakness, it was timing. He understood that public defense would shrink him into the exact frame critics built. Instead, he widened it. He let the work answer. Years later, people would still debate who was better, who was more authentic, who mattered more. But in that Los Angeles listening room, the question shifted. Not musician versus showman, but how much control can one artist quietly hold? The fork placed gently on porcelain, the studio locked in for nights, the raw vocal left unpolished, the 8 bars at the keyboard. Calculation. Because sometimes the most ruthless move in a rivalry isn't confrontation, it's mastery delivered without a word.